Hi everyone, it's Nini. Welcome to my channel. I'm in Mason City, Iowa. This is in the north central part of Iowa. Mason City has a population of about 27,000 and it's your typical Midwest town surrounded by farms and fields. Once you drive into the town, it's a very charming town. The streets are lined with trees, the Winnebago River runs through the city. Meredith Willson, who wrote The Music Man, grew up in Mason City, and when he wrote the musical set in the fictional town of River City, he based it on his hometown of Mason City. This is the site of one of the most infamous crimes in the state of Iowa. On June 27, 1995, Jodi Huisentruit left her apartment around 4 a.m. to go to her job as a morning news anchor. She never arrived. This summer will be 30 years since she disappeared, and it's still not known what happened that morning. Jodi Sue Huisentruit was born on June 5, 1968 in Long Prairie, Minnesota, to Maurice and Jane. She was the youngest of 3 daughters. She had a charming, upbeat personality and made friends easily, but she could be naive and too trusting. Jodi attended St. Cloud State University and desired to be a famous newswoman like Paula Zahn or Connie Chung.
Hi and welcome to St. Cloud State today. I'm Jodi Huisentruit. Joe, I'm not clowning around when I say our show has to come to a close. About 1/4 of Americans who don't vote Tuesday will claim they did.
She was very passionate about the news business. After graduating college, Jodi worked for a year as a flight attendant to see some of the United States, and then began her news career. She worked for KGAN in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and then for KSAX in Alexandria, Minnesota. Jodi's ambition was obvious. She worked hard and put in long hours. This is the KIMT studio in Mason City. Towards the end of 1993, Jodi got hired as a producer and anchor for KIMT's morning and noon program called Daybreak. It was a wonderful opportunity because up until this point, Jodi had just been a field reporter. With this new position, she would be sitting at the news desk. Plus, KIMT reached 500,000 people and was a CBS affiliate, so it could lead to her dreams of being on the national news. Jodi quickly gained popularity with the TV audience.
You are watching KIMT's morning show Daybreak, the time 6:32, 36 degrees here in Mason City.
She was a wholesome Midwest girl and people fell in love with her.
So you're listening to me. Okay, I got it. Best place to be. I'd like to borrow her blue eyes for a couple days.
Yeah.
Test them out a little bit. They're gorgeous. Oh yeah, first I do the news. You're right. Then I do the news. Okay. Good thinking. Way to go, Gavin.
I'm getting there slowly.
Way to keep me in check.
Jodi was popular off TV too. She gained a big social circle in Mason City. She caught the attention of a lot of men. Jodi was very friendly and loved to joke around, and that could be misconstrued as flirting. This is a vacant building in Mason City. Up until 2012, it was a bar called The Other Place. Jodi often hung out here, and one night in 1994, she met a man named John Vansice here. John was 22 years older than Jodi. He started to hang around Jodi and her friends. It seemed to most people that John had a crush on Jodi. Jodi considered John a friend, and John claimed he felt the same, but most people didn't believe that. On June 26, 1995, Jodi had a fairly regular day. She anchored Daybreak from 6 to 7 a.m.
Good Monday morning. Welcome to Daybreak. It's June 26th. I'm Jodi Huisentruit. Coming up, a wild weather weekend.
Yes, a lot of rain.
I don't like that forecast.
Sorry. I'll do my best to change it in like the next 20 minutes or so.
We do have a Mason City Chamber golf outing this morning, so.
Ooh.
Around 9 a.m., she played in a charity golf tournament and then attended a banquet. John Vansice said Jodi came over to his duplex to watch the tape he made for a birthday party. According to John, they laughed while watching the tape, and then Jodi headed home. Early on the morning of June 27, 1995, things were bustling in the KIMT studio as they got ready for that morning's show. Jodi usually arrived at the studio around 3:30 a.m. By 4 a.m., Jodi hadn't arrived. It wasn't uncommon for Jodi to be late for work. When this happened, her assistant producer Amy Coons would call and wake her up, and Jodi would rush to the studio. She didn't live that far away, it was about a 5-minute drive. Around 3:50 a.m., Amy called Jodi.
She answered and said, "Oh, what time is it? I'll be in 10 minutes." Everything sounded normal, just like I had just woken her up. I didn't hear anything out of the ordinary.
At 5 a.m., Jodi still wasn't there, so Amy called her again. This time, Jodi didn't answer. Amy assumed Jodi was just on her way to the studio. But 6 a.m. arrived when the show was supposed to start, and Jodi still wasn't there. So Amy jumped behind the anchor desk and filled in for her on air. When the show ended at 7 a.m. and Jodi still was not there, Amy asked an employee to call police and do a welfare check. These are the key apartments where Jodi lived in 1995. They look a little bit different than they did in the 1990s, but don't we all? Jodi lived on the second floor of this building. She owned a red Mazda Miata and it was parked in the first row about 20 feet from the door. Police arrived around 7:30 a.m. and immediately noticed signs of a struggle in the parking lot. The driver's side mirror on Jodi's car was folded back. A print from the back of Jodi's head was on the roof of her car. Her red high heels, a blow dryer, and other items were strewn about the parking lot. Her car key was on the ground and bent. It had rained the day before, so the ground was still damp, and there were drag marks on the ground that led east towards Kentucky Avenue. Jodi always carried a canvas bag, and that has never been found. It appeared Jodi got to her car, put the key in, someone grabbed her from behind, causing the key to bend and fall to the ground. They slammed Jodi's head against the car. They then drug her to their vehicle and drove off with her. It's been assumed Jodi was wearing those red high heels that morning, and as she was dragged away, they slipped off. But private investigator Steve Ridge thinks she was wearing other shoes and carrying the red high heels in her hands, along with the blow dryer and other items, and as she was grabbed, they fell out of her hands. I think that makes a lot more sense because if you're in a hurry and running late, you're probably not going to put on high heels. You're going to put on shoes that are more comfortable to move fast in. There were no signs of a struggle in Jodi's apartment, but police found 2 wine glasses by the sink and beer cans draining in the sink that were not the brand of beer Jodi was known to drink. The toilet lid seat was up. Police towed Jodi's car and examined it. They found a strand of hair that was not Jodi's, and a partial palm print on the roof of the driver's side that was also not Jodi's. Some neighbors reported hearing screams between 4:15 and 4:30 a.m. None of the neighbors called police about the screams because they thought they were coming from the campground near the apartment complex, and they didn't think they sounded like somebody was in danger. One neighbor told police the night before Jodi was abducted, they heard someone knocking on her door and a male say, "Open the door, Jodi, I know you're in there." She thought she heard the man give up and leave the building. Randy Linderman told police he drove by the apartment a little before 4 a.m. and saw a mid-1980s white Ford Econoline van in the parking lot. None of the apartment residents owned a van like that. Police issued pictures of a similar van and asked if anyone recognized it, but no one came forward. Word quickly spread through Mason City that Jodi was missing. The anchors at KIMT had to report on the disappearance of someone they knew, who some considered a dear friend.
This morning, our morning anchor, 27-year-old Jodi Huisentruit, apparently disappeared.
People in the community were heartbroken because they loved Jodi. Hundreds of people volunteered to search for her. They searched the parking lot, the woods near the apartment complex, the nearby Winnebago River. The Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations and the FBI got involved. It was hard to narrow down suspects because Jodi was on TV. It wasn't just friends, co-workers, and family who were possible suspects. Anyone who watched KIMT News could have taken her. It didn't seem like a random abduction. Jodi was definitely the target. Whoever took her obviously knew her schedule. They must have also known Jodi was sometimes late for work. What I find creepy is they waited for Jodi. Jodi usually left for work around 3:30, so they probably would have been in the parking lot around 3:15. Based on the phone call with Amy Coons and when people reported hearing the screams, Jodi left her apartment between 4:15 and 4:30. That means whoever abducted Jodi was so determined to take her, they sat there in the dark and waited for almost an hour for her. Jodi had told people she had been receiving prank phone calls. She also felt like someone was stalking her. In October 1994, a truck started to follow her when she was jogging. She reported this to Mason City Police and asked for an escort to work a few times because she was scared. In March of 1995, Jodi took self-defense classes and told the instructor she felt like someone was following her. Weeks turned into months and then into years, and there was no sign of Jodi. In 2001, Jodi was legally declared dead. In 2021, private investigator Steve Ridge said he tracked down a man who had begun to date Jodi shortly before she disappeared. He hasn't named the man to protect his privacy. They met on June 17, 1995, just 10 days before Jodi was abducted. They talked every day and went on a few dates. Jodi hadn't told friends and family about him yet. Police looked into him in 1995 at the time Jodi was abducted and cleared him as a suspect. There are several theories on what happened to Jodi Huisentruit. One is that some men she met while water skiing took her. The weekend before Jodi was abducted, she, John Vansice, and her friend Tammy Baker spent the weekend at the Coralville Reservoir and went boating and skiing. Jodi and Tammy got into the boat of two young men and they drank and danced. The owner of the boat took a video of this. He gave that video to Mason City Police, but it's never been released to the public. Did those men become obsessed with Jodi? A possible suspect was serial rapist Tony Jackson. He was arrested in 1997 and sentenced to life in prison. He lived in Mason City at the time Jodi disappeared. In 1999, a fellow prisoner reached out to crime reporter Caroline Lowe and said Tony told him he had killed the news anchor and made up a rap about it.
She's a stiffin around Tiffin and pilot a silage and a by-low low below off a highway by a grave road.
Caroline and crew drove to Tiffin, Iowa and found an abandoned farm near a graveyard. She alerted police and they searched it with cadaver dogs. The dogs alerted to the ground in the silo, but police found no human remains. I did find it interesting that they found a small piece of red fabric on the farm. Jodi was planning on wearing red high heels that day, so it's very likely that the outfit she was wearing would have had some red on it. The day before Jodi was abducted, Tony bought a dark grayish kind of greenish car. He returned it 1 week later and had put on 500 miles, which could have been from a drive from Mason City to Tiffin and back. A jogger ran by the Key apartments every morning. She said as she ran by the apartments in the early morning of June 27, a dark gray or green car with its headlights off sped out of the parking lot and almost hit her. Tony has denied having anything to do with Jodi's disappearance. Mason City Police stated Tony Jackson had been thoroughly investigated and they do not consider him a suspect. Another possible suspect was Thomas Corscaden. He was a convicted sex offender with a long criminal history and had been in and out of jail and prison. At the time of Jodi's disappearance, he lived in Austin, Minnesota. He often drove to Mason City for work. He drove a yellow Econoline van at the time that was described as a quote-unquote poor man's porn palace because in it he had a mattress, handcuffs, condoms, Vaseline, and sex tapes. Police looked into Thomas right after Jodi was abducted and took another look at him in 2004. They gave him a polygraph test and tested his palm print against the one found on Jodi's car. They did not match. Police cleared him as a suspect. Some people wonder if Amy Coons had Jodi abducted. She got Jodi's position after Jodi disappeared, so the theory is Amy had Jodi abducted so Amy could get her job. Amy said in an interview that having Jodi's job was a goal of hers, but she felt guilty that she only got it because Jodi disappeared. The news business is known to be competitive, but I didn't find anything from police stating anything about Amy being a possible suspect. And watching Amy in interviews, I don't get the vibe that she's vindictive. One theory is Jodi was working on a story on drugs and was killed because she knew too much. Mason City had a bad meth problem in the 1990s. The canvas bag she usually carried has never been found. Did she have notes in there that someone didn't want to get out? Jodi's friends and family doubted Jodi would work on a story about drugs. She wasn't an investigative journalist. She was a broadcast journalist. Police haven't put a lot of credibility into this theory either. Another theory is that Mason City Police or city officials covered up Jodi's abduction. Mason City Police received backlash for not better securing the parking lot that day, and some evidence could have been ruined. They also got backlash for not keeping Jodi's car. With advances in DNA technology, maybe more could have been found on her car if it had been preserved. In 2007, Shane Philpott received a call from someone who claimed police mishandled Jodi's case. Shane talked to his sister-in-law, Maria Ohl, who worked for Mason City Police. She told him to call the police so it could be formally investigated. Shane spoke to Mason City Detective Frank Stearns, who was heavily involved in Jodi's investigation. Frank told Shane they would get back to him and told him not to talk to anybody about it. A month later, Shane hadn't heard anything, so he called Mason City Police. He was told his story was not credible. In September 2010, Maria Ohl was fired for not following policies and procedures. She went to the media and voiced her concerns that Mason City Police were covering up Jodi's abduction. She claimed people told her 3 men were involved in Jodi's abduction. Mason City Detective Ron Vanderweerd, Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations Agent Bill Bassler, and Detective Frank Stearns. Maria sued the city for wrongful termination, and the court agreed with her and awarded her $95,000. In 2018, on what would have been Jodi's 50th birthday, her friends put up billboards around Mason City that had Jodi's picture. On December 31st, 2019, someone sprayed graffiti on one of the billboards and wrote Frank Stern's Machine Shed. The Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation stated there was no credible evidence that linked any police officer or Department of Criminal Investigations agent to Jodi's abduction. One Mason City employee people think could be a suspect is Dirk Jablonsky. He was the public works director for the city from 1995 to 2005 and then moved to Rapid City, South Dakota. In 2008, he resigned after he was arrested for stalking and harassing an ex-girlfriend. In 2015, Iowa State Representative John Quaker received a letter that stated Dirk was involved in Jodi's abduction. Dirk owned a van in 1995 and had put quote-unquote shaggin' wagon on the side, for Pete's sake. He used to live in Jodi's apartment complex. Jodi complained of receiving prank phone calls, and that is something Dirk did to harass his ex-girlfriend. The source who sent the letter to John Quaker said he also sent the tip to Mason City Police in 2008. When John Quaker talked to police about it in 2015, they claimed it was the first time they heard about Dirk Jablonsky being involved. Another possible suspect is Christopher Revak. In July 2009, Christopher was arrested for the 2007 murder of 36-year-old Renee Williams in Missouri. The day after he was arrested, he hung himself in his cell. Police believe Christopher is also responsible for the murder of 21-year-old Deirdre Harm, who disappeared in June 2006 in Wisconsin. Her body was found 5 months later in the woods. In 2009, police looked into Christopher for Jodi's disappearance, but said there was no evidence he abducted her. In 2024, police decided to look into Christopher again. The lead investigator on Jodi's case, Terrence Prohaska, drove to Wisconsin and met with investigators there to compare notes. I didn't see anything that said they have cleared Christopher again as a suspect. Was he a serial killer traveling around the Midwest, abducting and killing women? Now let's talk about the most obvious suspect, and that's John Vansice. John sure seemed like he wanted to be more than friends with Jodi, and she did not reciprocate his feelings. The way John talked about Jodi, he just sounded like he adored her.
She just meant so much to me, and we had so much fun together, her and her friends, and I even named my boat after her because just because she's Jodi, and she's been such a big part of my life here lately, and she just makes me feel so good and feel great about things. That's Jodi. I mean, you can't help but love that woman. You just can't help but love her.
John told police Jodi came to his house the night before she was abducted to watch her birthday party video. He told police he was the last person to see her alive, which is an odd thing to say, especially because he said that within an hour of them realizing Jodi was missing. John drove a van for work, and the beer cans in Jodi's sink were a brand John was known to drink. John's friend LaDonna Woodford said the morning Jodi was abducted, she and John walked together from 6:45 to about 7:45 or 8 o'clock. Amy Coons claims John called KIMT that morning around 7:15 and asked why Jodi wasn't on the show. Which woman is telling the truth? A man who wanted to remain anonymous said the morning of June 27, 1995, he met John at Casey's gas station at 8:05. According to him, John was white as a ghost and shaking like a leaf. He claims John said, "Jodi's gone." LaDonna knows who this man is, and she thinks he was lying and wonders if he was trying to make John look guilty to cover up that he abducted Jodi. She claims the man was, quote-unquote, totally obsessed with her. Police interviewed John and searched his home. He took a polygraph test in 1995 and passed. John was named as a person of interest in Jodi's abduction and still is today, but he's never been named an official suspect. In March 2017, a search warrant was issued for the GPS information on 2 of John's vehicles. Both vehicles were made after 1995, but my guess is police wanted to see if John visited wherever he buried Jodi's body. John was required to submit palm prints and fingerprints. It's not been revealed to the public if his prints match the ones found on Jodi's car. A little portion of the search warrant was recently released, but all it revealed was that during a 4-day period, when police looked at the GPS on one of the vehicles, John traveled from Baxter, Iowa to where he lived in Phoenix, Arizona. He used to live in Iowa, so was he visiting friends or family? Or was he possibly visiting where he buried Jodi's body? The rest of the search warrant remains sealed. I wonder if John lied to police, and instead of Jodi going to his duplex the night before she disappeared, he went to her apartment. Maybe they drank wine and beer as they watched the birthday video. Maybe John drank too much to drive home, so Jodi let him sleep on the couch. That could explain the toilet seat being up. John knew her schedule. He would probably know she was often late for work, too. 6 months after Jodi was abducted, John moved to Phoenix and remarried. In 2019, he announced he was suffering from Alzheimer's. He died on December 6, 2024. One theory is it was a random obsessed fan. Being a female news anchor is a risky job. Did someone watch Jodi on the news and become obsessed with her? What makes this theory so scary is that it could be anyone. KIMT reached 500,000 people. Despite this case receiving massive amounts of attention over the years, it is still unsolved. I found this little park to film in, and it's beautiful because there's these really pretty purple flowers all over the place, but it follows the Winnebago River, which is also pretty, but holy moly, the bugs are atrocious. Shortly after Jodi was abducted, this tree was planted at KIMT in her honor. It's now full grown and is a symbol of how long Jodi has been missing. While I was at the KIMT studio, there was a red convertible parked near it. It's not the same make and model that Jodi had, but it's a similar vehicle, and I just found that a little ironic. This is just such a sad case because Jodi seemed like a person who was just as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. It's been almost 30 years since Jodi Huisentruit was abducted. She's been missing longer than she was alive.